Hitler Poltz was born at 6:30 a.m. on April the 20th, 1889, in 219 Gasthof zum Palmer Street in Braunau, a small town of the Austrian Bavaria near the German border. His mother, Clara Poltz, was the third wife of his father. This marriage was a cause for conflict with her family, for he was her cousin and 20 years older than her. The troubles of her married life made Clara bestow all her love in her frailest child. In spite of his liability to idleness, her mother's help got young Adolf through the first stages of his education in the school of the Lambach's Benedictine monastery. In 1898, the family moves to the city of Linz, a town Hitler always regarded as his birthplace. There, he entered the Realschule, where he carried some of his studies out, showing small concern for languages and mathematics. His father, Aloy, was the son of an unmarried woman and changed his family name of Schlickelgruber for Hitler, which was an alteration of Johann Heidler's, the man his mother married not long before he died. He was a customs officer and had a liking for friends, drink, and pubs. Due to his job, he had to live in several border towns. He was cold and domineering and beat hard his son Adolf, a good-for-nothing dimwit in his view. This bad relationship with his father and his clumsiness in making friends turned Adolf into a self-centered person brooding the dream of becoming a great painter or a famous stage actor. He registers in the Catholic Arts and Crafts School of Linz, but has to quit because of pneumonia that gets him stuck in bed after his father's sudden death in 1903. At 14 years old, he enters the Steyer School, where he gets into troubles with his teachers because of his defiant attitude. In 1905, he decides to quit school and fully devote himself to painting. He draws quite a lot of paintings, stacking them up in the house where he lives with his mother and younger sister, Paula. In 1907, he tries to make the Vienna Fine Arts School, but he is rejected in the admission test. Disappointment and affliction out of his mother's death from cancer at 47 years old draw him to the Austrian capital. For several years, he will survive as a bum, working casually as bricklayer or sketcher. There he meets people who admire Germany's proud attitude towards the world. Fascinated by all of this, he moves to Munich in 1913. After evading the military service in Austria when a medical court declared him not fit for the army. In this city, he lives as a carpenter and sketcher. 1914. All of a sudden comes about what he calls his liberation. The official declaration of World War I makes him volunteer for the German army on August 3, 1914. In the war, Hitler feels free from years of frustration. Taken to the front, he joins the assault troops of the 1st Bavarian Infantry Regiment. His survival ability and his forceful manner make him a respected soldier among his mates and officers. He fights on the Western Front in the Battle of the Somme. Due to his bravery, he is appointed dispatch rider, and on October 7th, 1916, he is wounded in one leg, therefore being withdrawn from the front. After several months recovering in the Belitz hospital near Berlin, he goes back to the front where he is newly wounded by toxic gas at the end of 1918. He is awarded the Iron Cross for courage. Then Hitler is taken to the Passwalk Hospital in Pomerania, where he undergoes several operations after a temporary loss of sight. He passionately lives the news of the Russian Revolution and of his idolized Germany's humiliating defeat. (1919) The post-war leaves Corporal Hitler, as known as the Wolf, an orphan again. Far from the respect of his mates, humiliated and deeply hurt in his pride, he finds a country in violent turmoil. The German people face defeat. Riots and street brawls turn German cities into battlefields, where the political parties try to take over. Assigned to quarters in Munich, waiting for an appointment to service, he endeavors to analyze the reasons of Germany's defeat. He writes hundreds of pages about the Bolshevik Revolution that he deeply hates. In his chats with his veteran mates, they work over the party's regime that he deems the source of all evils, and over the expanse of the non-Aryans, bent on annihilating the Aryan race, which he thinks superior. His connections in the army provide him a job as informer for the German government. He will have to spot the revolutionary groups in the political coteries, focusing on the quickly growing parties. Hitler gets in touch with a group of ultra-right-wing anti-Jew radicals called the Workers' German Party, founded at the end of the war by the locksmith Anton Drexler. Stirred by what he sees and hears, believing that all this will fill the vacuum of his post-war life, he joins the party on September the 14th, this same year with the registration number 555. He attends meetings and his populist eloquence is well noticed. Hitler enthuses, telling the people what they are eager to hear. All his reasoning and theories about the evils pervading the great Germany are cheered by the increasingly ample group of people secretly gathered to hear the coveted speech about the evils spreading through the Republic. Building on Hindenburg's words that the Great War was lost because of the fatherland's enemies stabbing it in the back, Hitler adds up that this treason was brought about by Jews, socialists, and communists in order to destroy the great German nation. He argues that it is easy for the German population to behold the results of the Treaty of Versailles. From the outside and from the inside, the enemies want to sweep the great Germany from the face of the earth, he says. 1920. A socialist is the president of the Republic. Communism is forcefully spreading among the Germans while unemployment and hunger develop. For Hitler, this is chaos, and he feels that his task is to unite all the disappointed people. On February the 24th, 1920, he makes a speech, for the first time surrounded by swastikas, an old humanity's sign for worshiping the sun, taken for the symbol of his party. In April of the same year, he quits the army and becomes an excited street agitator. He multiplies his meetings, being now surrounded by powerful groups lured by his friend Göring. These groups subsidize the party's propaganda activities, including the newspaper Völkischer Beobachter. Bankers and industrialists see in Hitler the best protection against a rising communism and socialism. Bit by bit, the impoverished middle classes, fearing the communists' ideals, feel attracted to him. Persuaded of being chosen by the divine providence, he states that being a leader means to attract the masses, and nobody does it as I do. (1921). In 1921, the party takes a new name, the Workers' German National Socialist Party, NSDAP, better known as the Nazi Party. Thanks to the support of veterans and still-serving officers, he organizes a private army, the Sturbenteilung, or SA, the party's assault troops. Wearing army uniforms, the brown shirts are trained to terrorize their political rivals and act as a security service in the leaders' meetings. With these assault troops, Hitler becomes a minor but dangerous political figure in Germany. He relies on the support of reactionary officers, among which General Ludendorff, the Airman Göring, and Ernst Röhm, a Wehrmacht former officer. (1923). On January the 11th, 1923, claiming that Germany does not comply with the payments as stated in the Treaty of Versailles, French and Belgian troops invade the western industrial areas of the country. Facing British complaints in the League of Nations, the French withdraw, previously dismantling all the German facilities and taking with them the greatest possible amount of iron, coal, and steel. Hitler feels that the German pride is being trampled on. On November the 8th, after a meeting he leads his assault troops through the streets of Munich, following in the steps of his esteemed Mussolini, to try a coup against the Bavarian government. The national revolution has begun, he declares. But the hesitating attitude of his military supporters and the police baffle his attempt. Hitler is arrested, and the government orders the party to be dissolved. (1924). In February 1924, the Fuhrer-to-be, 35 years old, is brought to trial on a charge of treason and is sentenced to 5 years of imprisonment. Thanks to his political connections, he serves only 8 months in a cell of the Landsberg prison, from where he is discharged on parole on December the 20th this same year. While in prison, he dictates to his friend and party comrade Rudolf Hess his book Mein Kampf, My Struggle. In this book, he tells an autobiographical story, mixing the anti-Semitism and the greatness of the Aryan race with his plans for the future and the enslavement of the nation's citizens. The book is a success among his followers across Europe. In a gesture aimed to show his lack of interest for the worldly goods, Hitler bequeaths to the party all benefits obtained from the book. 1925. Once free, he rebuilds the party and takes the leadership over on February the 27th, 1925. Being in prison has made him change his strategy. He will reach power through democratic ways, without giving up his ruthless brown shirts army. They are the party's strong hand and a retreat for many veterans. In the following months, Hitler and his group run several elections with poor results. His political program, founded on the idea that the left-wing movements supported by the Jews are destroying the patriotic sense of the Germans, does not catch on with the voters. In April, supported by the right-wing Democratic parties, von Hindenburg is elected President of the Republic. He is a monarchist, but nevertheless swears to preserve a Republican constitution. 1926. In 1926, Germany begins to get out of depression under the rule of the centrist chancellor, Wilhelm Marx. The workers' class feels convalescing, but the upper class has borne a hard strain with the economic depression. Hitler tries to relaunch his political movement. He imitates his esteemed Mussolini's staging with the style of Roman emperors and establishes a Day of the Party, a feast held in the Weimar in June of the same year and to be held in Nuremberg in August 1927. 1928. In the elections of May 1928, the Nazi Party, with 100,000 members, gets 800,000 votes. That is, 12 seats out of the 491 seats of the Reichstag. It's a minor force. The new Social Democrat Chancellor, Hermann Müller, is by no means willing to allow the Nazi leader's verbal excesses and forbids him to speak in public. For this reason, he briefly withdraws from politics, moving to the Bavarian Alps, where he meets his cousin, Geli Raubel, and madly falls in love with her. 1929. The 1929 Great Depression is a hard blow to the embryonic German economic recovery. But it's the chance Hitler was hoping for. His remarkable ability as a speaker attracts thousands of followers.
Es kam die Zeit, da man sich nur dann mit Stolz zum Deutschen bekennen durfte, wenn man den Blick in die Vergangenheit. Wir wollen nicht lügen und wollen nicht schwindeln. Ich habe deshalb.
In his messianic-tinted speeches, he mixes socialist and nationalist principles and promises to restore Germany's greatness. Jobs, a fair distribution of wealth, and more nationalism supported by a powerful army. Fight and strength are the road to success. Our race's greatness is in the blood invading our bodies, not in those of the Jews and anti-patriotic communists. Words like these make people think he is a man with a destiny. His followers increase, therefore, and the party peaks up at 178,000 members. Dealing with millions of unemployed workers and sinking into economic depression, the government seeks support to face the situation. Hitler and his brown shirts take advantage, kindling riots and demonstrations. Meanwhile, the Communist Party scares the middle and business classes. In fact, both are planning the same objective: to take up the pieces when the Republic falls. (1930). Overcome by the events, the German Chancellor Hermann Müller resigns in March 1930. The centrist Heinrich Brüning takes over at the head of a minority government. When the parliament refuses its approval, he asks old President Hindenburg to call for elections. Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party gets 6,500,000 votes, which means 107 seats in the Reichstag. It's a giant step for small ultra-right-wing party with just 12 representatives up to then. It becomes the second most important German party and is thoroughly represented in all the social layers of the country. (1931) On September the 18th, 1931, Geli Rabbal, Hitler's great love, who wished to become a light opera singer, is found dead at home with a shot in her chest. The police take it as a suicide. This event, along with his mother's death, will have an effect for the rest of Hitler's life. Hindenburg, the military legend of World War I, presides over an increasingly disintegrated Republic of Weimar at 84 years old. He is overruled by the state's crisis. Chancellor Brüning and his policy undergo a severe harassment and destroy operation at the hands of the Nazi Party. This operation increases the pressure on the president, who is compelled to change Brüning for his demo-Christian friend Franz von Papen. (1932) Presidential elections are held in March 1932. The liberal, demo-Christian, social democrat, and communist parties, fearing a victory of the Nazi leader, ask Hindenburg to run again for the presidency. The old officer gets 53% of the votes. 18 million Germans want him at the head of the nation. 11 million have chosen Hitler. That's 37%. 5 million voted for Ernst Thälmann, the communist candidate who can only reach 10%. Hitler's political rivals can take a breath with these results, but the Nazi Party deepens in the idea that democracy is a bad derivative from the French Revolution, the most hated country. It's the German people's mistake to choose an aged military and spurn a strong and charismatic leader like Hitler. The brown shirts are not long to react. Their violent assaults against members of political parties incompliant with their theories drive the government to forbid their activities on April the 13th, 1932. Some weeks later, the Nazis gain the majority in the elections held in 5 federal states. Consequently, the national parliament is dismissed in June, and new elections are called for in July. The presidential election was a failure for Hitler. But this time, he is determined not to let it happen again. In rage, he starts the violent party's machinery to ensure the votes. His security forces, newly empowered by the government, launch a wave of bullying, terrorizing the citizens and hushing up those who don't share in the Nazi ideas. In the parliamentary elections of July the 31st, the Nazi Party gets 230 seats, which mean almost 14 million votes. It falls short of the absolute majority, but becomes the most voted party in Germany. In spite of that, the president and other political groups keep in charge Chancellor von Papen. Hitler's attempt to get hold of absolute power is a failure. Outwitted by the Nazi harassment against the state and the parliamentary political leaders, Hindenburg submits to Hitler, whom he despises, calling him the corporal, the charge of vice-chancellor on August the 13th. But Hitler refuses. He wants power and no meddling. The government is now completely paralyzed, and the possibilities of reaching an agreement to restore the state are absolutely non-existent due to the persistent boycott of the Nazi representatives. At that, a new election for the Reichstag is called for November the 6th of the current year. Many Nazi voters are scared of what Hitler may do if he gets to power, and they withdraw from him. Therefore, the National Socialists lose 34 seats, still being the strongest party with their 196 representatives in Parliament of 491 seats. On November the 22nd, President Hindenburg is persuaded by his own son, the State Secretary Meisner, and his good friend von Papen to proffer the chancellorship to Hitler. The president meets the Nazi leader. The mutual contempt aborts any chance of an agreement. General Kurt von Schleicher, a man respected by the army, keeps in charge as chancellor. 1933. But Hitler doesn't give up and asks his friend Hermann Göring to make the upper classes and the powerful industrialists to put pressure on Hindenburg. The old president eventually gives up and appoints him chancellor on January 30th, 1933. A personal friend of the president, the Demo-Christian von Papen, will act as vice-chancellor. The president thinks that von Papen's help and experience can hinder the new chancellor's ambition. But Hitler thinks differently. As a sort of down payment on what's in store for the aching German democracy, on February the 27th, the Reichstag is set on fire by Nazi agitators. Hitler blames the Dutch communist van der Lubbe and his accessory Ernst Togler, the communist leader in the German parliament. The Reichstag fire and the current national crisis prove that Germany needs a strong leader. This is the core of the program with which Chancellor Hitler runs the elections of March the 5th. The Nazi Party gets 44% in the polls. 17 million Germans support Hitler, but he still falls short of absolute majority. The Nazi leader is reluctant to undergo at any other time the rules of despised democracy. As chancellor, he meets old President Hindenburg, already affected by senile dementia, and makes him sign an order entitled People and State Preserving Act. He uses it to cancel some constitutional sections concerning the freedom of association and freedom of the press. Communists and socialists are arrested, their parties broken apart and banned. Having eradicated their opponents, the Nazis obtain in an anti-democratic way the absolute majority in the Reichstag with the approval of the right-wing parties. Hitler demands absolute power and this time gets it from a dismembered German parliament. The law giving all the powers of the state upon the Fuhrer is enacted on March the 24th. The nation's destiny and freedom are in his hands. The time has come to put into practice the ideas stated in Mein Kampf and crush the Treaty of Versailles. Millions of Germans hail Hitler as the man who can recover the greatness of the German nation. The rest of the citizens must accept the fact in silence, fear, and submission. The federal system is abolished and Germany becomes a single-party totalitarian country. On July the 14th, Hitler begins creating 3 police corps in order to totally subdue the citizens. The Gestapo, or secret police, will be in charge of the state's security. The SS, regarded as the topmost police, will have to bring round the people to the goodness of the regime. And lastly, the SD, or security service, will support the Gestapo operations. The political parties and workers' unions, having been banned, the first concentration camps are founded to admit the socialists, communists, and Jews arrested by the police corps and deprived of all of their rights and properties. Party Day is held on September the 10th in Nuremberg. Hitler announces that his 2 major objectives are the creation of a powerful army and rely on it for the vital space of policy goals. The new German foreign policy brings about severe conflicts with the French and English delegates in the Disarmament Conference. On September the 22nd, 1933, Hitler commands the German delegates to withdraw and not very much later to quit the League of Nations. On September the 11th, the Reichstag is fully seized by the Nazi Party. Hitler has an ability for measuring the political occasion. He knows how he reached power and the use he is making of it, so he tries to exhibit a moderate man, look to the world and to his country. The new foreign policy is submitted to a public vote and thus approved by 95% of the voters. 1934. In January 1934, Germany signs a non-aggression agreement with Poland, Hungary, and Switzerland. The 3 countries agree to avoid the use of strength to solve problems that should arise between them. On April the 17th, the French government, feeling suspicious about the German diplomatic moves and aware of their rearmament, re-announces its will to preserve the borders if they are not assured. On June the 14th, Hitler goes to Venice to meet for the first time Benito Mussolini. The exaggerated macho gestures of El Duce set a contrast with the emancipated look of the austere German leader. The night of June the 30th to July the 1st is known as the Night of the Long Knives. More than 200 people are murdered by Hitler's personal order. Among them, officers of the SA, who helped him on the road to taking power in charge of the dirty work. The listing of brown shirts to be eradicated has been drafted by Göring and Himmler and shows a purpose to sweep away all persons with some authority in the organization. In particular, the homosexuals, who are or were in charge of the military wing of the party.
Und ich glaube nicht.
In the present situation, their assistance is not needed anymore. Moreover, they are despised by the army officers and the industrialists with whom the Fuhrer intends to make friends. Blamed for having let left-wing elements slip in the security forces in order to seek an agreement with the Russians, Ernst Röhm, chief of the SA, Gregor Strasser, leader of one of the party's wings, and the ex-chancellor and general Kurt von Schleicher, among many others, are executed, along with 50 SA and some SS officers. The spiral of terror deepens on July the 25th, when a Nazi commando unit murders the Austrian Chancellor Engelbert Dollfuss, the designer of the Austro-fascism. This fact opens a gap between Mussolini and Hitler, when Hitler realizes that Mussolini's support is needed for the annexation of Austria. Hindenburg, the hero of Tannenberg, dies on August the 2nd, taken away by senile dementia. In his last days, he was calling the Nazi leader Majesty, thinking he was the Kaiser. He was a stout monarchist with a hard, domineering temper. He despised Hitler and kept stating that the German army had not been beaten in World War I battlefields, giving thus ground to the stabbing theory. At his bedside also lies what's left of the Weimar Republic. For Hitler, the last hindrance in his road to totalitarianism has vanished. He calls for a public vote on August the 19th, asking the people to confirm the absolute power once granted to him by a dismembered and terrorized Reichstag. It is approved by 91% of the voters. At 45 years old, the introverted Adolf Hitler is the sole master of Germany. He is president and chancellor of the Reich. All the power for one man, the Fuhrer, the guide, the leader. Now, at least, he has proven that his authority comes directly from the Volk, the united people, not from the party or the state. The dictator's self-assertiveness has been fulfilled. (1935) In January 1935, Hitler's government reaches its first big foreign policy success when a public vote is held, established in the Treaty of Versailles in the Saar district, seized by the French. 90% of the voters asked to rejoin the German nation. Subsequently, the League of Nations Council Society has to decide the transfer of the district to the Führer's power on January the 17th. In the same year, England seems willing to sign a naval treaty with Germany, thus becoming the first country in admitting the legitimacy of the German rearmament.
If at first you don't succeed, try again.
Hitler figures he has scared the rest of the European countries and that the time has come to start his Lebensraum, or vital peace policy. His objectives are the Anschluss, or annexation of Austria, and the annexation of the Czechoslovakian Sudetenland district. In March, Hitler rejects the battered-up Treaty of Versailles, reestablishes compulsory military service, and begins building up the Luftwaffe, the military aeronautics. On September the 15th, the Nuremberg Acts deprived the Jews of all of their properties and rights. Thus, the theories of Alfred Rosenberg, the Nazism main thinker, start their journey through history. Rosenberg had mixed his own ideas with those of Heinrich von Treitschke, published in 1879 under the title "The Jews Are Our Misfortune." By imprisoning the Jews, I fight for the working of our Lord, says Hitler. Nobody knows the reasons of Hitler's rage against the Jews. Some think it may have been because his mother died after being looked after by a Jewish doctor. The fact is that the oldest hate and bitterness in the world is now the fuel of a huge horror machine. Like the Christian theologists of 60 AD, for whom the Jewish people deserved all the evils for not accepting Jesus Christ as their Messiah, the anti-Semitism becomes the central axis of the Nazi policy under the severe watch of Hitler's ruthless lieutenants. Hermann Göring, from a well-to-do family. As a famous pilot in the Great War, he was respected and esteemed in Germany. He is a member of the Fuhrer's military council. Commander of the assault groups and head of the Air Force, he is also the founder of the Gestapo and responsible for the concentration camps. In order to manage the German economy, he will rely upon the help of the brilliant Dr. Halschar Schacht. The Minister of Propaganda is a journalist, Joseph Goebbels. He has a talent to manipulate the public opinion and is rather eloquent. He writes most of Hitler's speeches. His reasoning is grounded on the idea that 1,000 times stated a lie becomes a truth. He is in charge of turning Hitler into a myth. Heinrich Himmler helped Hitler in his Bavaria coup and is since his faithful underling. He is the designer of the SS and, along with Reinhard Heydrich, also the designer of the final solution, the Holocaust of the Jews, the Gypsies, and the homosexuals, among others. Rudolf Hess is a veteran of the Great War where he got a medal, like Hitler. He met the Fuhrer at his beginnings in the Workers' Party.
Die Partei ist Hitler!
He felt so impressed by his speeches that he virtually became his shadow, indeed sharing his very prison cell. He is Hitler's private secretary. Hitler begins to rule with these men. Books are burned because ideas are dangerous. The nation's newspapers and culture must be managed by the state. Jews are prosecuted in the name of Aryan supremacy. Their businesses and estates are being razed to the ground. They are being banned from all social and professional life. Germany becomes a nightmarish country under the impervious look of other nations that suffered the bitterness of the Great War. Germans who disagree are terrorized and rather prefer to ignore the general horror. Adolf Hitler boasts of being the discoverer of the battle for work. He is giving them what they want: great public programs and infrastructures with which to develop the country and create jobs. The pride of a pure race, honor and courage against the anti-race of the Jews and other ethnic groups mingled in the countries that humiliated the great Germany. Work in return for silence and no freedom. German industries support Hitler because the economic development fostered by the country's militarization is bringing huge benefits. Few people are worried by the fact of being subdued to a political power in the shape of a military dictatorship. Many of them are conscious, however, that the lack of control in the public spending is driving to a critical point to which war will be sought for solution. (1936). On March the 7th, 1936, a small Nazi unit marches on Rhineland. To reject the Treaty of Locarno establishing the border situation with France and Belgium, it's a bold step for Hitler. He knows he is not ready for a strong reaction from France or England. In a few days, they can crush his Third Reich. But for him, all nature's work is a fight between the strong and the weak. Risk is the lot of the chosen ones, and the Aryan race, that is Sanskrit for noble, will always be superior to the others. This is the message Hitler sends to his officers when the German army finds no resistance and seizes the demilitarized district of Rhineland. The European allies are unable to take measures in order to stop the new Germany's challenges. Elated by his victory in Rhineland, Hitler meets his esteemed Benito Mussolini, whom he regards as the 20th century Caesar. They agree on creating an axis, Rome-Berlin, in order to launch bold military campaigns and share the war loot. The military coup against the Spanish Republic in July the 18th gives Hitler an assurance concerning his interest in South Europe if he supports the victory of the military dictatorship as Italy and Portugal are already doing. On July the 30th, the first 87 planes take off from Germany to Cadiz in order to help the Spanish rebellious officers. He will support Franco all along the Spanish Civil War, and this war will be an excellent testing field for the German weapons. England and France decide to keep neutral, while Russia will help the Spanish government. On August the 1st, Hitler opens the Berlin Olympic Games. Berlin had beaten Barcelona in the nominees' voting of Los Angeles in 1932. The German government wants to show prosperity and organization in spite of the participating country's uneasiness at the aggressive and racist policies of the Reich. On October the 25th, the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Count Ciano, ratifies in Germany the agreement for the Axis Rome-Berlin. With Italy for an ally, Hitler is ready for his next move. In November, he brings Japan on to sign the Anti-Comintern Agreement, according to which both countries agree to fight against the Communist International. The Empire of the Rising Sun had quit the League of Nations because of its problems in Manchuria. (1937). On April the 26th, the German Air Task Force, the Condor Legion, shows its power raiding Guernica, the cultural capital town of the Spanish Basque Country. Heinkel's 111, Dorniers, Junkers, and Messerschmitts show their capacity to destroy upon helpless citizens. On November the 5th, 1937, the Hossbach Protocol, drawn by Hitler's assistant Colonel Hossbach, is signed in a secret meeting. The meeting is attended, besides the Fuhrer, by Field Marshal von Blomberg, War Minister Fritsch from the Army, Raeder from the Navy, von Neurath from Foreign Affairs, and the 3 high commanders of the armed forces. This protocol states Hitler's plans to seize all Europe before 1945 in order to gain vital space for the Aryan race.